Today, we're looking at Pakistan, which is heading towards the general election scheduled for the 11th of May.
We shall also try to grasp the motives behind the comeback attempt staged by General Pervez Musharraf.
Why would the general decide to come back to the country he had fled 4 years ago? What are his goals, and is he likely to deliver?
We are discussing these issues with our guest speakers, Samina Ahmed, International Crisis Group Project Director for South Asia, and Ahmed Qureshi, Senior Research Fellow with the Pakistan Federal Reorganisation Programme Project for Pakistan in the 21st century.
So, just to brief our listeners before we start our discussion, Pervez Musharraf returned to Pakistan on the 24th of March this year with a slogan, "To Save Pakistan." So, he formed his own party, which is called the All Pakistan Muslim League, APML. But interestingly enough, first, his nomination papers were rejected by the returning officer on the grounds that perhaps Mr. Musharraf is not religious enough. He's not a devotee Muslim. So
there's certainly a certain irony in this, that the papers were rejected and that there were problems regarding his approach just to try to get himself entered in the election, let alone try to be elected in the country he once led.
Yeah, but later on, I suppose the decision was overturned. But it's worth mentioning that the judiciary, with whom General Musharraf used to have a very difficult relationship, have reacted to his comeback with some degree of enthusiasm. Just let me quote. The Supreme Court on Tuesday, the Dawn reports, resumed the hearing of a treason case against former military ruler Pervez Musharraf amid the latter's refusal to personally appear before the bench. Just look at that. I mean, isn't it a welcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a very strange situation for him to welcome, particularly from the judiciary, when it was his dismissal of the judiciary in his last years as president that was one of the causes for these things to be brought against him.
That's it.
So for this to be brought back seems quite an unusual development, to say the least.
By the way, he is also accused of the Constitution, holding the Constitution in suspension on the 3rd of November 2007. He accused of having removed and detained a majority of the judges of the superior judiciary, like you say, and publicly insulting Chief Justice Iftihar Muhammad Chowdhury. So these acts were declared mala fide, unconstitutional, and without jurisdiction by the Supreme Court in 2009. Well, that's a massive offence, if I get it right.
No, I mean, certainly, not only in Pakistan, but in all countries. There are sort of laws regarding who can and cannot stand for elections, and these are sort of major charges that have been levelled against him. And while it's certainly true that while in office, major politicians and leaders can gain some sort of exemption from criminal proceedings, in the normal course of things, it would mean that someone would be banned or would not be able to take part.
Well, but like we said, the decision was overturned. However, I'm trying to better understand the motives behind Mr. Musharraf's comeback. Because now, look, so now he is living in his farmhouse, Chak Shahzad locality. It's near Islamabad. And according to newspaper accounts, it is a heavily guarded fortress-like farmhouse. Fortress-like. But, I mean, he got back to his own home country. And I'm sure he remembers only too well the history of Benazir Bhutto, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan who was assassinated on her comeback to participate in the election.
No, I mean, certainly the Benazir Bhutto case is a very strong reminder that when people try to return to politics, there's always a very strong risk. And equally, generally, countries tend to move on in a sort of 4-year period. New personalities emerge, new conflicts go, and to a large extent, Pervez Musharraf, he'd left the country. He was living in Dubai, he was living in England, he'd gone to the United States for an undeterminate period of time. He's doing a lecture circuit to gain money. It's a very unusual comeback when it looks like he seemed very much to have cut himself off from the country.
By the way, talking of Benazir Bhutto and about Mr. Musharraf's travel record, just let me quote the papers again. Granting pre-arrest bail to the APML chief, well, this is President Musharraf, in the murder cases of Baloch leader Nawab Akbar Bukti and former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, the Sindh High Court had already barred him from traveling abroad. So the question is, why? I'm almost certain that Mr. Musharraf was not exactly willing, he was not exactly looking forward to this kind of welcome.
No, not at all. And having cut himself off from the country, there was certainly a large support at the time of his coming to power and during his power from the military. And there's very little sort of indication that the military is willing to support him in such an endeavour in the future. But in order to enter the country, particularly under these very inauspicious circumstances, problems with the judiciary, problems relating to his previous time as leader, somebody who is actively campaigning for re-election, they need support from somewhere, and this is something that we've not seen so much evidence for of where this is going to come from.
Well, not seeing evidence does not necessarily mean that there is no such evidence or no such support.
No, this was my point, that I think that without that support, it would not have been
absolutely.
It would not have been possible. It would have not been a feasible plan to come back to Pakistan on a whim.
So I do suggest that we could take a closer look at, first of all, why General Musharraf decided to get back to Pakistan. And this is something we've been discussing with our guest speaker, Samina Ahmed, International Crisis Group Project Director for South Asia, based in Islamabad in Pakistan.
Musharraf has returned physically to Pakistan in a bid to make a political comeback. There are very few chances that he will meet his own aspirations for sure, or that of his followers. He has virtually no support. He has a number of cases that are being lodged against him, which means that whatever damage was done by Musharraf in those years of dictatorial rule, he'll have to now face the music. That is not a good and conducive environment to make a political comeback.
Well, certainly not. But this was already known even before he got back to Pakistan. So what was the ultimate idea of staging his comeback?
As I said earlier on, Musharraf had his own aspirations without understanding the ground reality. His belief that he was popular, his belief that he can save the country, his words, is what has led him to come back without still understanding, despite all evidence to the contrary, that he has absolutely no support and there is no political role for him to play. So yes, he has ambitions. Ambitions don't make you a politician with a following.
Do you think that the legal cases against him are going to proceed against Mr. Musharraf? Do you think that the courts are going to proceed with those legal cases?
At this point in time, we can't say if the cases are going to be taken up by the courts in any meaningful way. But certainly there will be hearings held, and certainly there will be petitions taken before the superior courts by citizens. And that includes bar associations, the legal associations. And there will be constant challenges made. So regardless of whether those cases are pursued by the superior courts, the fact is the headlines in the Pakistani media are not about Musharraf's comeback. The headlines are about the cases that are being lodged against him. These cases include subversion of the constitution, which by law in Pakistan is considered high treason. The punishment, if the punishment is ever given, it's not been done, is death.
Oh my.
Let me put it this way. I doubt very much that we are going to see sentences passed anytime soon. But the charge itself, subverting the constitution under Article 6, is a very serious charge.
Right. It looks like now Mr. Musharraf is taking extremely heavy security measures when he is traveling around the country. So how safe do you think he is there? And another question, does the army have any sympathy for him? Let's put it that way.
I suspect the army would want to distance itself from Musharraf, given his popularity and the strong opposition that we see voiced by all elements of civil society, all the major political parties. In terms of Musharraf's security, well, clearly, threatened by the militants for his actions. And quite obviously, there would be concerns, I'm sure, amongst military circles about his security, given that he was, after all, chief of the army. And that is not something that they would want to see happen. Any threat that's made to Musharraf, if it translated into action, would not be seen by the military lightly. It would not be taken lightly.
Samina, and in fact, my last question would be just, what is the general sentiment in Pakistan now? What would the electorate expect of an elected leader?
The electorate in Pakistan expects a huge amount of the next government. It expects basic services, it expects security, it expects economic stability. So aspirations are very high. The problem is that no government in the near term can meet all those aspirations. But said, the very fact that they are aspirations means that the average Pakistani believes in the democratic process and believes in the ballot box.
Thank you so much. And just to remind you, our guest speaker was Samina Ahmed, International Crisis Group Project Director for South Asia, based in Pakistan.
You're tuned to the Voice of Russia.
This is Burning Point.
We're discussing the decision by General Pervez Musharraf to return to Pakistan and stand for election.
So, to me, it's really good news that the Pakistani people are now so determined to get on a democratic route of development and perhaps to see democratic reforms introduced. However, still I fail to understand the logic of Mr. Musharraf. Look, he's been charged with very serious state crimes. And, well, though it seems that the expert community does not believe that he would be sentenced for them, still the feeling must be pretty nasty. Yet he comes back. He comes back to live in a guarded location. So, what is it? I mean, was he really that independent in that decision?
It certainly seems it's not a decision anyone would make very easily or with very sort of without an awful lot of thought put into it as to what they were hoping to achieve. So,
just looking at the history of the country,
yeah, I mean,
Pakistani leaders hardly died natural deaths. You know?
No, not at all. Certainly, ever since independence, many of the leaders have died in the circumstances within the country, and the fact that he's living, as you say, he's living under guard. He has all this sort of political stuff hanging over his head. And he's now forbidden to leave the country. It also it curtails a lot of his freedom, and it also creates a huge amount of personal risk.
Absolutely. So the question is still in the air. And now I suggest we might listen to another expert also coming to us from Pakistan, and I'm happy to present to you Ahmed Qureshi, Senior Research Fellow with the Pakistan Federal Reorganization Program, Project for Pakistan in the 21st Century, also coming to us from Islamabad. What is the logic behind this comeback? Because he seems not to be feeling exactly safe in his own country, which he had fled for 4 years ago. We all remember he went for medical treatment to the United States and remained there ever since.
I think President Musharraf is simply trying now to further his own political career in terms of what he could do for the country. Of course, he tried his best for about 9 years, and I think that's more than anyone can claim to ever, even hope to rule in Pakistan. So it's a big thing, and it's the first time that Pakistanis see a military ruler, and we've had 3 of them, ever return back to practice politics after leaving office. So it's certainly something new for most Pakistanis, but in terms of what he can achieve, I don't think that he has the potential to upset the political equilibrium in Pakistan. He certainly does have a political party, but it is not well established. He does have admirers and followers. People do remember the fact that the initial years of his government after he seized power in 1999 were quite good, actually, in terms of political stability and in terms of economic progress. But the number of those admirers is not large enough to sort of justify the fact that he could build a political career in Pakistan.
Okay, but then what is the use of coming back? I mean, what idea could that be? Is it an American project of trying to bring Mr. Musharraf back to Pakistan and perhaps somehow to capitalize on his influence as a political figure, or what?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. There is no doubt about the fact that Mr. Musharraf's stay abroad outside Pakistan was brokered and arranged by the U.S. government, the former administration of George W. Bush. So there's very little question about the fact that whatever arrangement under which he was living outside Pakistan was completely protected by both the British and the American governments. And his return to Pakistan must have been under that arrangement itself. So the question of his return being linked to the American policy in Pakistan is not outlandish and is definitely not a conspiracy theory. It is a fact, although no party would confirm this. President Musharraf will not, and he is on record actually recently, a few days ago, having said that his return has nothing to do with any foreign arrangements. But we all know, and in fact the Pakistani media had reported that prior to his return to Pakistan, he activated all his contacts in several foreign governments, and in particular in the American government, the administration of President Obama, the British government, and the Saudi government. And he sought guarantees, and he sought these governments' influence over President Zardari and his government in order to have a safe return. So there has to be that link. It exists. It could, and you raise actually another very, very important question. The U.S. government is deeply, deeply concerned about the changing political scenario in Pakistan. It has betted all its horses initially on Musharraf when he was in power. But after he lost his utility, the Americans put all their eggs in the basket of President Zardari. And they hope that the coalition government that Mr. Zardari led over the past 5 years would achieve many of the things that Mr. Musharraf failed to achieve in terms of domestically inside Pakistan. Now, it's another, of course, issue, of course, the whole evaluation of what Mr. Zardari did or didn't do. But his term is over now, and the Americans would like to have the next government closely aligned with the American objectives in the region. And for that, they would certainly look at Mr. Musharraf as one of the options that could be helpful in achieving the American goals here.
This is Burning Point, looking at General Pervez Musharraf comeback to Pakistan.
Just to remind you, we're talking to Ahmed Qureshi, Senior Research Fellow with the Pakistan Federal Reorganisation Programme Project for Pakistan in the 21st century. He's coming to us from Pakistan.
Which might give you an impression that perhaps they don't seem to have too many allies in Pakistan right now. I mean, allies among the ruling elite.
No, they do have allies, actually. The outgoing government, which was a coalition government of three political parties, the party of Mr. Zardari, Mr. late Benazir Bhutto's party, and then two other parties, the ANP and the MQM. These parties are considered to be, are known actually to be U.S. allies inside Pakistan, but they're out of power. So how much they can be of use to the U.S. government is to be seen after the result of the elections. And the Americans are very disturbed. They're not stupid. They know that this government has lost credibility. It failed to govern the country. It failed to improve the political and the economic situation. So it may not get enough votes to be influential. So they are allies of the United States, but they're useless allies now. So the Americans are very panicked. They're looking at their options. And they hope that Mr. Musharraf, for example, could do something and could have a good performance in the elections, get good votes, so that maybe they could establish good working relationship with him, which they had before. So I'm sure they're looking at Mr. Musharraf, and they're also trying to, of course, contact other opposition leaders and trying to establish relations. As a matter of fact, we already have some media persons in Pakistan, Pakistani journalists, who are talking about extensive activity by both the American embassy here in Islamabad and the British embassy here in quietly meeting with Pakistani politicians. It's a very naked and a very blunt kind of political interference, but one thing has changed positively for the people of Pakistan. Pakistanis now do not want their vote to be hijacked by foreign interests, the way it happened back in 2008, which unfortunately President Musharraf also partially facilitated. They don't want to see a repeat of that. And for the first time, we have the Supreme Court of Pakistan, the courts, the judges, weighing in on this and coming down very, very harshly and very, very hard on those candidates who have foreign connections, who have foreign passports, particularly if they are citizens of the United States and the United Kingdom. They are being sort of screened out and weeded out from the process of the election. So all of this is happening, and it's a very, very interesting scenario, and it's a very difficult situation now for a country like the United States, which had an open field back in 2008 to manipulate a coalition government the way it saw fit. It can't repeat that now.
Well, absolutely. And as far as I understand, the judicial have been very quick to react. I mean, they have revived several legal cases against General Musharraf. So, do you think that they would succeed in those cases?
I don't think they will succeed for one simple reason, and that is Mr. Musharraf is a former chief of the army. And I don't think the military establishment in the country would like to see a precedent created where an army chief is tried on the basis of the fact that he led a coup and toppled the government. The situation in Pakistan politically is very unstable. Even now you will find many, many analysts who will tell you that eventually the military might have to intervene in the country down the road in some form or the other, maybe not forming a military-led government, but certainly making changes for a different type of government, a technocratic government or so forth. So you have many, many scenarios here. And I don't think the military would like to shut the door to a future intervention by having its retired army chief tried. And the judiciary would also not want to get into a confrontation with the military right now because this is not a priority for the judiciary itself. The judges know that the army and the military in Pakistan is not interested in leading a military coup. If that is to happen, that would be only as a last resort or due to intense political instability, but not short of that. So the judges, even the judges, are not really very focused on sort of antagonizing the military. They're more focused right now on making democracy work. And the way to do that is to come down hard on the politicians who fail to govern. And that seems to be the direction right now instead of confronting the military. And trying Musharraf would be really confronting the military. And so I don't think it would go very, very far.
Mr. Qureshi, thank you so much. And just to remind you, this time our guest speaker was Ahmed Qureshi, Senior Research Fellow with the Pakistan Federal Reorganization Program, Project for Pakistan in the 21st Century. So just to sum it all up, just in a nutshell, it looks like Mr. Musharraf has staged a, shall we put it, an unwilling comeback to Pakistan. What is going to come of that? Well, we don't know. But definitely he needs to pay the debts to those who used to support him while he was in the so-called self-imposed exile. And, well, to tell you the truth, I think that his fate now is hardly enviable.
No, not at all. I mean, he's caught in a very difficult battle, both with his past and thinking how the country's going to move forward in the future as well. And certainly the people are going to be making a big claim on him. But I think with so much of this, with the political baggage that's come along, with the whole sort of legacy of his involvement with the Americans before he left,
given the strong anti-American sentiment in Pakistan now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure his presence his very presence in the country is not a particularly stabilising influence.
Well, I think it's a highly risky endeavour for him in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, risky for him, but also I think maybe for the stability in the country as well, to have that such a controversial or figure so mired in controversy to be there.
Well, perhaps so, but that is the price you pay for getting involved in the big politics. And, well, with this we end this edition.